Good to have you with us. You're watching ARIRANG News live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We start with the historic news that Korea's Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of disbanding the leftist minor opposition Unified Progressive Party founded just about 3 years ago. For more, here's our Ji Myung-kil.
8 out of 9 judges at Korea's Constitutional Court ruled in favor of disbanding the minor opposition Unified Progressive Party on Friday. It is the first time the court has ordered the dissolution of a political party since it was founded in 1988. During a nationally televised verdict, Justice Park Han-chul said the minor opposition party had violated South Korea's constitutional order and sought to achieve a North Korean style of socialism. The party's 4 members, including now former lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, were arrested last year on charges of trying to instigate a rebellion against the South Korean government in the event of war. As a result of the party breakup, all 5 of the party's lawmakers were immediately stripped of their seats. The National Election Commission says a by-election will be held in April to fill 3 of the seats, while the other 2 will be removed altogether. The ruling also prohibits any party with similar goals and ideologies from being established in the future. The head of the Unified Progressive Party, Lee Jung-hee, was resolute after the announcement.
I, as the chief of the party, am responsible for today's ruling. Although the government has dissolved our party, it is not going to dissolve our liberal mentality.
The nation's 2 main parties had decidedly different viewpoints on the court's decision.
It is both a victory for the Constitution and liberal democracy. We urge the UPP to reflect upon what they have done wrong.
The main opposition party expressed concern about the precedent it might set.
We are worried that the ruling might have undermined the freedom of a political party, which is the foundation of democracy.
Friday's groundbreaking decision by the court came after the Justice Ministry filed a petition late last year to break up the Unified Progressive Party. And many political analysts expect the decision to further deepen the rift between liberals and conservatives in the country. Ji Myung-kil, ARIRANG News.
Following a committee decision last month to adopt a resolution calling for the North Korean leadership to be brought to the International Criminal Court for human rights abuses, the UN General Assembly passed the resolution on Thursday, local time. North Korea quickly denounced the move. For the details, here's Song Ji-sun.
The UN General Assembly has voted in favor of referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor 116, against 20, abstentions 53. Draft Resolution 1 is adopted.
The non-binding resolution drafted by the EU and Japan was previously approved by the Assembly's 3rd Committee, which deals with human rights. This vote comes after a UN Commission released a report in February that detailed the extent of abuses in the North, including political prison camps, torture, starvation, and mass killings. The UN Security Council will meet next Monday to discuss the resolution, but is almost certain to face stiff opposition from veto-wielding powers, China and Russia. Because of this, watchers say that while the Assembly vote increases international pressure on North Korea, it's largely symbolic. Pyongyang's envoy to the UN lashed out at the passage of the resolution.
My delegation totally rejects the resolution because the resolution has nothing to do with promotion and protection of human rights, and it is a product of a political plot and confrontation against the DPRK.
He added that North Korea was ready for dialogue and cooperation on human rights, but said the issue was being used as an instrument for regime change. Western nations are moving to put North Korea on the UN Security Council's agenda, but China opposes the move, saying the Council is not the proper forum for discussions on human rights. The General Assembly also passed a resolution on Thursday condemning rights abuses in Syria and Iran, but did not go as far as referring them to the ICC. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
South Korea's foreign ministry has welcomed the passage of that UN resolution and called on Pyongyang to implement concrete measures to improve the situation. In a statement released Friday, the ministry said the adoption of the strongest resolution yet reflects the international community's determination to deal with North Korea's human rights abuses. The ministry added the South Korean government has always and will continue to urge North Korea to take specific and practical actions to enhance its human rights conditions. Now, North Korea's diplomatic landscape has changed a lot since current leader Kim Jong-un came into power 3 years ago. But one thing for sure is that Pyongyang still remains very much isolated from the international community. Here's our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Seung-hee for this report.
Getting cozy with Russia, sending a high-level delegation to South Korea, negotiating the abductee issue with Japan, and releasing American detainees. North Korea engaged in a series of unusual diplomatic overtures this year as it found itself on the outs with its longtime ally, China. But the efforts proved unsuccessful.
Led by the United Nations, North Korea came under strong pressure to improve its human rights issue. Consequently, its efforts to diversify diplomacy hit hurdles and the regime became even more isolated. I think it was a very difficult year.
Pyongyang warned of more nuclear tests to counter the latest UN push on its human rights violations.
In their attempts to eliminate the state and social system of the DPRK is compelling us not to refrain any further from conducting nuclear tests.
But analysts doubt Pyongyang will be so hasty with a nuclear test, since that would anger its allies China and Russia, although the regime will likely launch a violent protest.
Their strategy, their playbook is to respond with force, fight fire with fire. Another nuclear test, another missile launch. Satellite launch, I think, will be coming in 2015.
That would further delay the possible resumption of the long-stalled six-party nuclear talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Nonetheless, experts say North Korea will be more aggressive with multilateral dialogue next year and seek diplomacy at the highest level.
In order to end its current diplomatic isolation, North Korea will be more vocal about resuming the six-party talks. In that process, it could seek a visit to China or Russia by Kim Jong-un.
Seoul's Unification Ministry echoes that view. It expects Pyongyang to use all means available for a bilateral meeting with Washington. There could also be some progress in negotiations with Japan by July, marking the one-year anniversary of opening such talks. And if these all-out efforts to end its diplomatic isolation fail, the ministry says North Korea could seek an opening by turning to South Korea. Hwang Seung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged to play a constructive role in denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. That came during a meeting with the Speaker of South Korea's National Assembly, Chung Eui-hwa, in Beijing on Thursday. President Xi said Beijing would do its best to persuade members of the six-party talks to come to the negotiating table, which aims to get North Korea give up its nuclear ambitions. The Chinese leader also pledged to support cooperation between the two Koreas for the sake of peace in Northeast Asia. Now, North Korea is still widely believed to be behind the recent hacking into Sony pictures, but the U.S. hasn't made an official announcement yet. The White House on Thursday local time, though, did say that it was keeping a close eye on it as a serious issue. For more, here's Kwon So-ah.
A serious national security matter. That's how the White House labeled the cyber attack on Sony pictures. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said that the evidence suggests there was malicious intent behind the hacking and that it was done by a sophisticated actor. But he did not name North Korea as being that actor. He said a range of possibilities were being considered and that the Justice Department and FBI was still investigating. But all signs seem to implicate Pyongyang, and some with knowledge of the probe say their involvement has in fact been determined. A U.S. official said the hackers stole a Sony administrator's identification card, giving them access to the entire building. Another piece of information came from a North Korean defector who claims he was part of a North Korean agency called Bureau 121, which trains around 18,000 people to become members of a hacker's army. Sony, while the victim here, has not dodged criticism for canceling the theatrical release of the movie The Interview, which centers on a CIA plan to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Some say the studio caved in to the demands of the hackers and that their reaction could open up new threats of the kind against others in the future. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The nation's nuclear power plant operator says its systems and related computer networks that control nuclear reactors are working fine. Now, this follows reports from last night that crucial pieces of confidential information about employees and reactors were stolen in a hack attack and leaked online this week. The stolen data was reportedly released Monday on a blog run by a group of hackers called Who Am I? That blog is now shut down. The plant operator has asked the prosecution to open an investigation into the alleged hacking attack. A government probe is currently underway in the meantime, but government officials say no trace of hacking has been found yet. Korea's finance minister has pledged to push forward with structural reforms next year as it seeks to achieve strong and sustainable growth. And those structural reforms will take place in key areas like labor and education. For this report, here's Hwang Ji-hye.
Structural reform. That's what economic policymakers will focus on next year. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said in an economy-related ministers' meeting on Friday that the government will push through structural changes in the labor, education, financial, and public sectors in 2015 to revive the country's growth potential.
The government will raise the efficiency of the public sector and create new dynamics in the financial industry so there can be a virtuous circle between the financial sector and the real economy.
Che added that labor sector reform will center around measures to create high-quality jobs and to increase corporate competitiveness, while educational reform will focus on nurturing a workforce that caters to industrial needs. He also emphasized that pushing through structural reforms is a must for the Korean economy, although it's not an easy task.
We should overcome our fears toward changes and make a big leap, using creative ideas and alternatives.
To support the reform efforts, Che said the government will continue to work on revitalizing domestic consumption and investment while closely monitoring risks stemming from the country's snowballing household debt problem. The finance minister's remarks come just days before the government unveils its economy management plan for next year. The plan will lay out the big picture of economic policy direction and new growth forecasts for 2014 and 2015. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Now, Thursday was a big day for U.S. stocks. The Dow Jones recorded its widest surge in 3 years, and it wasn't a bad day for the S&P 500 and NASDAQ either. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 both saw a gain of 2.4%, and the NASDAQ Composite a hike of 2.2%. Investors snatched up tech stocks, which led the rally, with the database software company Oracle spearheading the charge. Its stock rose by more than 10%. Sony, in the meantime, also rose after days of decline. The buying spree is being attributed to U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen's guidance that the central bank was in no rush to raise its key interest rate, even as the U.S. economy looks to be improving. Now, at an annual year-end news conference, Russian President Vladimir Putin spent time assuring the media that the Russian economy will bounce back. He also blamed Russia's economic woes on a West that wants to declaw it, while adding that adequate measures were being taken by Moscow. Have a listen.
There are also some questions to both the government and the central bank about the timing and quality of those measures, but as a whole, the actions are absolutely adequate and in the right direction. There is also no doubt, and I would like to underline it, the rebound, the subsequent rise of the ruble, and the exit from the current situation is unavoidable.
It's crumbling currency and also the central bank's decision to hike the key interest rate by 6.5 percentage points. The ruble lost about half of its value against the US dollar this year amid falling oil prices and economic sanctions. Korea-based KB Investment and Securities says the Japanese yen is undervalued by 19% from its intrinsic value, a steep rise from the 3% recorded last year. The firm took into account the differences of the interest rates of 10-year bonds in the U.S. and Japan to come up with the intrinsic value. It shows that the yen is undervalued the most it's been since 2000. This is quite a different picture from the third quarter of 2012 when the yen was overvalued by more than 8%. Now that was right before Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced quantitative easing measures.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
U.S. Congressman Mike Honda is well known in Korea for his efforts to resolve the issue of Japan's wartime sexual slavery of Korean women. He's in Korea for a 5-day visit and meeting with reporters in Seoul on Thursday. Honda said it was time for Japan to take action on the issue. Kim In-ji reports.
A U.S. lawmaker says Japan needs to recognize its historical responsibility and apologize for its wartime sexual enslavement of women. Speaking to reporters in Seoul, Representative Michael Honda says this is a problem that needs to be resolved with urgency, considering the age of the victims. Only 54 of the Korean victims are still alive, and their average age is 88.
How many, they're getting older, and I don't want us to use the tactic of outweighing them and, waiting until they all pass away. That would not be acceptable.
Honda, who is of Japanese descent, also said it is nonsense to question whether the women were coerced into sexual slavery.
Coercion was there, and it was a great part of why girls and women were kidnapped into sexual slavery.
Honda, who was at the forefront of the passage of a landmark 2007 resolution condemning Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women, said recent talks between Seoul and Tokyo on the matter were productive and helpful, even though they have yet to reach a breakthrough on the issue. The lawmaker said that the U.S. will continue to communicate with the Japanese Prime Minister to move the issue forward.
Hopefully now we can move this issue forward to create a greater political pressure and peer pressure to the government of Japan.
The Japanese-American lawmaker is in Seoul for a 5-day visit, which will take him to a house for former sex slaves, as well as a string of meetings with government officials. Kim In-ji, ARIRANG News.
From nut rage to nut craze, the scandal surrounding the former vice president of Korean Air has been a major headache for the company, but it's given Koreans a taste for the macadamia nut, the very snack that triggered the whole controversy in the first place. Shin Se-min has the story.
Macadamia nuts, which were thrust into the spotlight as a result of recent nut rage incident here in Korea, have been a range of its own lately.
They are flying off the shelves and selling out online. The incident that battered the career and reputation of former Korean Air executive Choi Hyun-ah has been a boon for the macadamia nut industry in the country. Major online shopping mall G Market saw sales surge by 20 times last week compared to the week before. Large offline chains like Costco and Lotte Mart have also seen a considerable jump in demand. Suppliers couldn't be happier. More than 80% of Korea's imports come from the birthplace of the macadamia nut, Australia. The Australian Macadamia Society said in a press release that it would renew its focus on the Korean market. Hawaii's $38 million macadamia nut industry is also feeling the effects.
This week alone, we have received requests for pricing and information on our product line from 4 or 5 different groups from Korea.
And while demand is rising, some question its origin.
It's absurd, and it's unfortunate that this has become the focus of the nation when we have other real problems hurting the nation.
And as for the best way to enjoy the nuts,
yes, macadamia nuts, whether they're served in a bag or on a silver platter, it's the same great tasting, very classy nut, no matter how you have them served.
Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The world's largest furniture retailer has arrived in Korea. Ikea opened its doors to the public for the first time on Thursday, hoping to thrive in a furniture market that's already quite saturated. Connie Kim reports.
The freezing cold weather isn't stopping people from waiting in long lines to be among the first inside Korea's first Ikea. Now, as you can see behind me, there is a seemingly endless line of people waiting to get a glimpse of the Scandinavian-style furniture inside.
This is new to me and quite different from conventional Korean furniture.
However, the Swedish furniture giant's entry into the market wasn't without controversy. Known for its low prices, IKEA's arrival has sparked concern among small and family-owned businesses that offer ready-made furniture at premium prices. IKEA has also caused a stir for inflating the prices of some of its pieces compared to global locations. It also drew criticism for its high transport and assembly fees. But IKEA says it's ready to offer something different to appeal the Korean market.
We have studied the Korean market. We have done a lot of home visits. We visited over 80 homes and had really thorough interviews with the people living in these mainly apartments to understand the needs.
IKEA designed this living room set specifically for the Korean market, tailoring it to the space in local apartments. The company created new storage units for the verandas often found in Korean apartments and special beds designed to fit into the space so people can use the space to get a quick rest. After discovering that Korean parents traditionally spend more on children's furniture than parents in other countries, IKEA Korea expanded their selection. In short, IKEA is offering more choices and possibly lower prices. But the question now is how consumers will react to what the Swedish furniture giant has to offer and what that means for the competition in the local market. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. The freezing cold weather has finally subsided, and compared to today's morning low was about 5 degrees higher, whereas our highs will rise back up above the freezing point as well. Now, looking above the peninsula, we have partly cloudy skies, which will turn to mostly cloudy skies as the day moves along. And those of you heading out tonight, make sure to have an umbrella handy because there is rain or snow in the forecast all across the nation. In fact, Gyeonggi-do and its upper surrounding regions can expect pretty heavy rain of between 5 and 10 centimeters. And now to our readings for today. Seoul is around 1 degree this afternoon, while Gwangju and Busan lingers higher at 5 and 9 degrees. And moving over to other regions such as Jeju Island reached up to the teens, while Dokdo was at 7, while Mangkang was below the freezing point at -5 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park. Now, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time.